we have been giving away. And given the fact that it's spring and it's time right now to get out there and make sure that you can buy a home, if you know what the market is like all over the country, Nashville, where I live, Atlanta, Houston, Dallas, New York City, Chicago, LA, all over the country, it's hard to get properties that are sought after. Being pre-approved for mortgage is a big deal. They'll pre-approve you and have you able to make the wagers, have you able to make the bids to get the home that you want instead of having to worry about it. I'm telling you right now, it's a really competitive housing market. Let my friend Ryan Kelly at The Home Loan Expert take care of you no matter where you live, all over the country. They will hook you up, and it is brutal out there in these property streets. A lot of you know if you're in the spring and you're starting to buy a home, if you love a particular neighborhood, you love a particular area of your city or your state, you know as soon as those houses go on the market, there's bidding wars. Make sure that you have got already your mortgage taken care of. Plus, you can lock in a great rate. TheHomeLoanExpert.com. My guy, Ryan Kelly. All right, let's dive right into it. Arizona, okay? Arizona, let's kind of take a step back. If you are not familiar with this story, what was it? Probably 10 days ago, ESPN's Mark Schlabach reported that Sean Miller was on a wiretap conversation from the FBI saying that he was going to pay $100,000 for DeAndre Ayton, the surefire lottery pick 7-foot center for the Arizona Wildcats. Immediately upon that story breaking, a lot of you, like me, I think it was last Thursday or Friday, that story broke about a week ago, immediately thought, okay, this is probably the end of Sean Miller's coaching career. He was pulled out of coaching on Saturday night on the road against Oregon. If you remember, the Oregon student had the $100,000. They had fake checks that they held up in the crowd. But Sean Miller denied that there was any truth to it. That's kind of what you would expect in an NCAA-related issue. But then, a lot of you started to send me links. I've done a lot of the reading on it. Slowly, several of the details from ESPN's reporting started to break down. The date didn't make sense. The conversation between the alleged handler and Sean Miller didn't really make sense. Sean Miller argued he had never even knew this guy and he didn't talk to him. So today, just about 45 minutes ago, this was the story. I'm going to read some of these quotes. Sean Miller is back. Big story. Sean Miller is back. He has returned from the coaching dead. He is going to finish his situation here. He's going to finish the season. All right, let's talk about this for a minute. Here are quotes from Sean Miller from a prepared statement that he read at the press conference, if you didn't hear it. I have never knowingly violated NCAA rules while serving as head coach of this great program. Miller said the reports that he knew an employee named Christian Dawkins at the ASM Sports Agency and that he talked to him about payments for Ayton to go to Arizona were in fact inaccurate, false, and defamatory. ESPN has made corrections to its story since then. He also said that he had one conversation with someone soliciting money in exchange for a player attending Arizona, but did not disclose the identity of the player. And Miller said significantly, I did not agree to it. It never happened, and that player did not come to the University of Arizona. Miller also indicated he intends on coaching against Stanford and beyond. I look forward to coaching this outstanding team, he said. He did not then answer any questions. Okay, so immediately, a lot of people ask the question, what happened here? ESPN has since said that they 100% stand behind the accuracy of their statement as well. So ESPN is not running here. So what's the story? What actually happened? Easy read here is we don't know. Okay, I'm not going to be outlandish, but I'm going to break down the legal process as I would see it. Okay, one of the things that you learn how to do if you are a lawyer, I'm going to put on my lawyer hat. One of the things that you learn how to do when you're a lawyer is you procedurally work through a series of questions to try to figure out what the facts are. So it's significant here that first of all, let's talk about the ESPN story. What we don't know is Mark Schlabach's sourcing. We don't know exactly what he has gotten. We don't know where that wiretap is. I think it's fair to say that he probably got this information leaked to him by one of the defense attorneys who is involved in this case. Okay? That's my best guess as to what could have happened. Now, you could have a transcription error. you could have this conversation taking place not about DeAndre Ayton, but about somebody else. It's also possible. This is kind of crazy, but I want you to think about this. If there were people who became aware that wiretapping was going on, is it possible that the FBI could have wiretapped somebody pretending to be Sean Miller? A lot of coaches have these burner phones. Whether or not it might be somebody or not is pretty fascinating. I think there are a lot of different potential angles here where this story could be different. Some people say FBI leaked it. I don't think that makes sense. I don't think it makes sense if the FBI leaked it, because there'd be a lot more stuff they could be leaking as well. And so I think it's strange that you would choose this particular aspect of the story to leak. So, immediate response from a lot of people is Sean Miller should sue the bejesus out of ESPN. ESPN was incorrect, according to Sean Miller in their reporting. They almost have cost him his job. They undoubtedly have cost him recruits. They undoubtedly have cost a huge hit to his overall reputation. They have dragged his name through the mud. And according to Sean Miller, the accuracy of the reporting is incorrect. Here is where I think a lot of people, both in the media and in sports fandom in general, don't understand. Defamation, when you are a public figure, is an incredibly high standard to reach. Let me talk about the difference between public and private figure. If you are a private figure, and it's becoming even more difficult to determine exactly what a public versus a private figure is in today's day and age, when everybody has Instagram accounts and Twitter accounts and Facebook accounts, and I can type in most of your names on Google and immediately find out all sorts of information about you. But historically, the difference between a public and a private figure was a public figure was someone who was in the news for a legitimate basis. It could be anything. You could interject yourself into the news, i.e., if you wrote a letter to the editor and somebody else wrote a letter to the editor ripping your opinion, you couldn't get mad at them and say that they had defamed you because you had voluntarily interjected yourself into the conversation. In today's modern day, and it used to be like public versus private figure really exists in the New York Times v. Sullivan era, 1960s even, when you had all these editors sitting around making decisions about what a public or private figure was. And I'll give you an example recently in the last 20 years in the media. Do you remember when Don Imus got fired for saying that the Rutgers basketball players, the women, looked like nappy-headed hoes? They tried to sue. I think that was around 2004-ish. They tried to sue, alleging that he had defamed them, and the court tossed that. Because the court said, no. Rutgers female basketball players, they're on television, they're in public arena in general. Just because he insulted them and just because they're college athletes, that doesn't mean that they are able to recover. They are public figures. And I would argue, I've actually written this, I would actually argue that we have reached an era where the distinction between public and private figures is really hard to justify because, frankly, what is the line? The way that you write about college players, the way that you write about recruits, the fact that everybody has these public profiles now, I would argue that there's no longer really a need for a distinction between public and private figures. But there is a distinction, and undoubtedly Sean Miller is a public figure, okay? There's a big distinction. Like, I always get asked this question. There's probably some law students watching this right now. A good law review article for you guys as we approach 2018, 2020, is what is the jurisprudence now between public figure and private figure? I would argue we just need one standard for defamation for everybody in the country, and we don't need to make a distinction between your fourth grade teacher and Donald Trump, because your fourth grade teacher may well be just as active on Twitter these days as Donald Trump is. Like, the number of people out there who are sharing their political opinions, who are active online. If you are at all intrigued by this concept, public versus private figure, I'm telling you guys, if you're I get emailed and asked all the time, hey, can you give me an idea for a law review article? Can you give me an idea for a legal related dispute? I think public versus private figure is really fertile ground right now because so much has changed in the media environment since the 1960s that it's hard to know who is a public figure. The easy way to think about it is somebody who has a viral video a public figure. Is Chewbacca Mom on Facebook? Remember Chewbacca Mom, the woman who went viral, putting the Chewbacca mask on, and everybody was talking about her? In theory, she's a public figure, right? She's totally private, but the degree to which everybody can suddenly go viral makes us almost live in a post-private figure life. Anyway, it's worth contemplating. Okay, so we know that Sean Miller is a public figure. That's just the background on the distinction for defamation. Defamation, when you are a public figure, requires a really high standard. All right, I'm going to explain what that standard is, and I have saved it on my phone because I didn't want to mess it up. So I'm going to read it to you right now. In the context of defamation, that also involves libel and slander. Libel is written, slander is spoken. In this context, there would be both libel, the written product, as well as slander, the spoken product, where somebody goes on the air and says things that are untrue about Sean Miller from his perspective. A public figure cannot succeed in a lawsuit on incorrect, harmful statements here in this country unless, okay, let's presume that Sean Miller can prove that these statements are untrue, okay? He can only win his lawsuit if there is proof that the writer or publisher acted with actual malice by knowing the falsity or by reckless disregard for the truth. So public figures have a really high standard. And again, even if you are wrong, even if Sean Miller were able to prove this ESPN report is completely wrong, he would still have a very high standard to meet. He would have to prove the writer or publisher had actual malice against him. What kind of evidence could there be of actual malice? That would require that Mark Schlabach or one of his editors or somebody out there have said at some point in time, I hate Sean Miller and I want to go out and get him even if there's no evidence whatsoever that he's behaved wrongly. My goal here is nothing less than to ruin him. It's a high standard to have to find. By knowing the falsity or by reckless disregard for the truth. Now, reckless disregard for the truth is interesting because in a defamation suit, I doubt that Mark Schlabach or anybody else at ESPN would give up their sourcing. So it would be very hard for Sean Miller to be able to figure out, how did they get this information? Was this information reliable? Was the person who provided it reliable? Because most media will protect their sourcing and refuse to give that up. So what is likely to happen here? I think what's likely to happen here is that, one, what does the evidence actually show? Eventually, when all this evidence comes out, what did Sean Miller do on wiretaps? If it comes out that Sean Miller is caught on wiretap saying something about potentially paying a player, ESPN could have gotten the story wrong and still not be liable because it's Sean Miller and he's a public figure. Now, if there's no wiretap and if there's no evidence about DeAndre Ayton and if there's no evidence these guys ever talked, then the story is wrong. And the question becomes, was ESPN acting with actual malice or were they acting in a way that was indefensible, basically, by reckless disregard for the truth? I think the likelihood of what happens is Sean Miller doesn't want to file a lawsuit here, I don't think. But I would certainly threaten to file a lawsuit. And if I were Sean Miller, I would try to get millions of dollars out of ESPN. Also, think about this. Where would Sean Miller file this lawsuit? I don't know all the tort claims that he could potentially bring in the state of Arizona, but I'm guessing that ESPN would not want to be defending a lawsuit filed by Sean Miller in the state of Arizona, naming ESPN as the defendant. Do you think that it's likely that there are a bunch of Arizona Wildcat basketball fans who are going to be very disposed to not be favorably receiving ESPN's argument? I think it's likely that ESPN potentially is going to have to pay millions of dollars to settle this lawsuit and avoid it going public and turning into a mass spectacle. Now, most of the time, people do not file defamation lawsuits. I can't tell you the number of times that I have said something of a negative nature about a public figure, and immediately people are like, oh, Clay Travis about to get sued. Clay Travis about to get sued. Look, you can always get sued, but in my head, I'm always working through the law behind what I am saying and writing, and it's always opinion-based about public figures. And so the standard that I would have to meet in order to be liable from defamation is really difficult. And most of the time, the people who threaten to sue for defamation never actually do it because they don't want to get deposed. They don't want to sit down and have to answer questions under oath that could potentially open them up to more widespread issues. So, okay, what questions do you guys have about this Sean Miller case? Because I think there's going to be a lot of misconceptions out there about exactly what this means. Let me say from outside of the legal perspective. This is the way that I would respond to all of these instances of wrongdoing that are being alleged. I would just say, screw it, we're playing our guys, prove it later that we cheated. Because at this point in time, you've already played the guys all the way up to March. What more do you have to lose at this point by sticking by them and continuing to play them? I don't know what the risk is. I also think that sometimes when there is a cataclysm, it's better than when you're caught all by yourself. Let me explain. If there are a lot of different major programs involved in wrongdoing, then the odds of any one coach getting crushed here become lower. Like Rick Pitino got in substantial trouble because Rick Pitino was the only coach named at once who was a big name. If there are 10 or 12 or 15 big name coaches all named at once, I think the NCAA is going to have to offer some form of mass plea bargain, basically, where they go back and redefine the law, the rules of the NCAA. And so the idea that suddenly every single coach is going to be under fire, I think is less likely. I think this is such a widespread mess that it's more likely that the NCAA tries to sue for peace here. All right. Questions from you guys about the Sean Miller case, because I think probably a lot of you have questions on both Facebook and Periscope, and I think, frankly, a lot of them are unlikely to be answered very well by most of the media covering this. Do you think Arizona will move on from Miller? No idea. Because remember, in order to fire Sean Miller, if they're allowing him to come back, they're basically acknowledging they don't have evidence or cause to fire him or suspend him. So maybe he mutually agrees to leave. Maybe there's an NBA job he can get and he leaves at the end of the year. But when you allow him at Arizona, when the school president and their brain trust allows him to come back, I think it's harder to justify firing him for cause in the future without new evidence that comes out against him. I think this evidence was substantial enough for you to argue we have to fire him for cause. But I think if you allow him to come back, you're basically cleansing this story. And you're saying, hey, we believe you, Sean Miller. Right now there isn't evidence to fire you. You're allowed to come back and coach. And once that happens, it's harder to then go back and unring the bell and say, oh, by the way, at the end of the year, we're actually going to fire you for it. Will Jay Billis be included in a lawsuit for his negative rant about Sean Miller? No, I mean, you could sue anybody for anything. But Jay Billis reacting to the ESPN story with an opinion about Sean Miller is literally his job. So you can sue him. There's absolutely zero chance that Jay Billis giving his opinion of this alleged story would be actionable by Sean Miller or Arizona or anybody else. That's literally his job. Jay Billis is a public figure. So is Sean Miller. No, there's no actually. Will ESPN reveal their sources? Great question. I don't think so. Usually, reporters will not reveal their sources when they are sought after. Here's the other question. Guys, if they are dealing with the FBI or they're dealing with sealed court documents, there could have been a crime committed in the leaking of those documents. So not only do I think ESPN will not reveal their sourcing, it's possible that the people who gave ESPN these documents actually committed a crime and or violated a court order in order to do that. And so the likelihood of ESPN not only revealing its source, but also revealing a source who may have some criminal or civil liability as well for this statement is even less likely. So I think that the likelihood of that happening is low in terms of ESPN ever revealing a source. I think the likelihood of an actual lawsuit being filed is low. I do think ESPN may have to pay substantial damages. Would Mark Schlabach be liable personally? Yes. Yes, you're a writer. You'd be liable personally as well. But he doesn't have the resources. They'd want to go after ESPN. And I'm not privy to what contracts ESPN writers sign. But a lot of times when you write for a entity, that entity is ensuring your liability through its larger umbrella policy. So from a pure, like, how do you pay off the damages here? Schlabach is probably covered for his lawyering through ESPN.com or ESPN's overall in-house legal counsel. And again, it's not like Schlabach just published this article. I'm assuming that there are 4 or 5 different editors at least, and maybe other writers as well, who assisted on this story. I don't think Mark Schlabach has like a bone to pick with Sean Miller, and he's trying to ensure that his career is over. Again, remember what the standard is in order for defamation to exist against a public figure. It's actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth. I don't believe that either of those are going to be easy to prove. Can ESPN, if it was a sealed document that they are discussing, can ESPN get into trouble? This is a fascinating question. Because on the one hand, your argument is you want the public to have access to documents in stories such as these. On the other hand, court rulings have precedent and procedure. It's probably unlikely that ESPN would be liable for writing about what was a very newsworthy document. For instance, there have been a lot, like the Pentagon Papers, if you go back to that case. Those were leaked documents, but the courts decided that those documents were of such a newsworthy story that even though they were leaked documents, the group that published them was not liable. And so I think it's unlikely that ESPN would be liable there. I believe there's a lawsuit currently pending from who was the figure who had his medical file leaked. Do you remember that? ESPN, I think it was Adam Schefter, reported on somebody's injury, and they actually included a photo, I think, of like an X-ray of a player. And there was a lawsuit. I think there's a lawsuit pending there about invasion of privacy for that lawsuit. Jason Pierre-Paul. Yeah, Jason Pierre-Paul. That's the lawsuit. I think that lawsuit is still pending. Now, that's a little bit more of an interesting wrinkle because all of us have medical privacy rights, and there's an argument that the medical privacy rights were violated right there as well. So that would be that's a different little angle, but there's that precedent that's hanging out there of that lawsuit right now. So frankly, DeAndre Ayton could also have a claim here because he has been alleged to have taken $100,000. DeAndre Ayton's family. There are a lot of people that could theoretically sue if this is not true. I think damages are harder to show for DeAndre Ayton because he's going to be a lottery pick in the summer, and it's hard to argue that other than his name being dragged through the mud, that he's had any impact. There could be tens of millions of dollars in lost income at play here if you are Sean Miller. Okay, all of that to talk about the Sean Miller case. I think you'll probably hear more good details from me about that than anybody else. So I appreciate all of you coming and hanging out here. I want to hit a couple of more fun stories. What would I do if I were the NCAA? Let me ask that. If I were the NCAA, I would come out and basically give blanket immunity. I think they're in a real difficult situation. If this case is as big and as ugly as it appears to be, I would provide blanket immunity, and I would go in and completely revise all of the rules of amateurism. That's frankly what I would do. Blanket immunity, because otherwise I think it's going to be a drip, drip, drip of continuing disaster. I think it's a lot like the steroids era in baseball, where a lot of people were cheating, and it's hard to build back the trust in the sport. I think you just come out and say, look, this was more widespread, more corrupt, uglier than any of us ended up believing. And so as a result, rather than have 20 coaches lose their jobs, we're going to give total immunity here and try to figure out how to make sure that this doesn't continue to happen in the future. All right, did you guys see this? I'm just going to show you this picture. We had a lot of serious talk here today. Did you see this? This 14-year-old in Alabama, 14-year-old in Florida, sorry. 14-year-old in Florida is in school. This 26-year-old science teacher, I'm about to hold up her picture. This is unbelievable. I don't know how this happens. I'm going to show you this girl's picture. 26-year-old, I believe she's a science teacher. She was buying weed and having sex with a 14-year-old boy. Do you see this girl? Can you see her Facebook? Can you see her? Right here. This is an unbelievable pull, right? I mean, there are a lot of single guys looking at this story right now and married guys whose wives and girlfriends do not look this good in a bikini, and you're not in 8th grade, and you're not 14 years old. I think I need to make this kid like the president of Outkick right now. There's no telling what he's going to be able to accomplish in the rest of his life. People say, oh, well, what do you think about this? Like, I think the girl probably clearly has issues, but I have been a 14-year-old boy, all right? A lot of you watching this right now have been 14-year-old boys too right now, okay? this is every 14-year-old boy's dream come true. I can't tell you the number of times in 8th grade or 9th grade that I fantasized about the hottest teacher in my school wanting to bang me. Every single guy watching this right now did the exact same thing. And that is why these women teachers never get convicted by juries. Because there isn't a man alive who has a functional penis that's going to sit on a jury and consider that 14-year-old to be a victim. Because you know what? They're going to remember being 14 years old, and this would be like a dream come true. Now, does this chick have all sorts of major psychological issues? Yes. She has. I understand completely why every 14-year-old boy in America would dream of banging his teacher, all right? 99.99999% of the time, it never happens because the 26-year-old smoking hot teacher has a lot better options than banging a 14-year-old. But no jury in America that has men with functional penises on it is convicting this chick of statutory rape. And people say, well, what if this was a guy teacher and it was a 14-year-old girl? Well, that's different. It's a double standard. It's a double standard because it's twice as true. I don't think, and I don't know because I've never been a 14-year-old girl, I don't think most 14-year-old girls who grow into women sit around legitimately wanting to have sex with a 20-something-year-old teacher in their school. I think every 14-year-old boy on the planet has wanted to have sex with the hottest teacher in his school. In fact, I'll ask you this right now, Facebook and Periscope. If you are a grown man now and at one point you were 14, just say yes if this is true. Did you want to bang the hottest teacher in your school when you were 14? And did you fantasize about it all the time when you were sitting in class? I don't believe there's a 14-year-old kid on earth. A lot of you are going all caps yes. In fact, almost all of you right now can name the teacher from your 8th or 9th grade class that you would have picked. Like you would sit around and rank the teachers, every single one of them. Look at all the yeses rolling in. So this is the difference in terms of, I think, how women and men think. So I don't even know how you think if you're the dad here. I think you have to pretend that you're really disgusted. On the other hand, I think you have to be like, holy fuck. I've got 3 boys. If one of them came home at 14 years old and I found out that they were banging a girl that looked like this, I don't even know what I would say. I'd be like, yeah, she really shouldn't have taken advantage. Like, I don't even know what I would say to my wife. I would be like, holy shit, how did he pull this off? This is one of the most incredible things I've ever seen. So I don't know, like, what do you say? Like, if you're a dad, I think you just say, like, I don't really feel like he's a victim. I feel like there's no stopping him when he actually gets to college. If you can convince your 26-year-old smoking hot teacher to have sex with you when you're 14, there's not a sorority girl on earth that you're not going to bang once you actually get to college. This is like, this guy is, like we should put him in the cabinet and have him start negotiating a peace treaty with North Korea. This guy's got the wherewithal of a savant. I don't even know how to keep it out. I mean, I need to just give him control of Outkick right now and make him CEO. Final thought today. Dallas area, I believe. They removed the statue of a gorilla outside of a playground because, and I'm not making this up, there were complaints that the gorilla was racially insensitive. The gorilla is in a cage. It's not a real gorilla. It's a gorilla statue at a Dallas area park. And somebody got in their mind the idea that they needed to protest a gorilla statue at a children's playground because it was racially insensitive. What has happened to our country that animal statues are now racially insensitive? It's a fucking gorilla. It's not insensitive racially to you. Kids love monkeys and gorillas and apes and all sorts of animals. Kids love animals. Like every animated movie, the animals talk. Every kid loves animals. When is the madness going to stop And when are fucking idiots going to stop being listened to? If you have time to focus on stupidity like this, I think we should put you in the cage and you should have to stay in there and get pelted with tomatoes by everybody else with decent sense of reasonable minds. I love all of you. My name is Clay Travis. The kids love the statue. And by the way, the statue is evidently returning in a positive story because Dallas has recognized that the statue is not racially insensitive because it just so happens to be an animal. I swear to God, the country's gone insane. I'm the only sane person left. I am Clay Travis. This has been Outkick the Show. We'll be live tomorrow, 6 to 9 a.m. Eastern. You can hear I'm finally getting better. I theraflued that bitch up. I laid down. I slept for 5 hours this afternoon. Got up in time to break down the legalities of the Sean Miller mess. Thank you for all of your time and support for Outkick. Share the show with friends if you love me. If you hate me, tell as many people as you possibly can. Because guess what? It's the best publicity I can get. This has been Outkick the Show. Don't be a pussy. DBAP, boys and girls. See y'all.